Hello mga ka-NURSEBES! How are you doing today? Kamusta na po kayong lahat? I missed you! So wala ako masyadong ganap these days kasi I'm very busy. Masyadong nape-pressure sa akin pag-aaral, sa mga revalida, sa mga community health assignment namin, tsaka yung exams namin, tsaka sobrang nakakapagod na. So, medyo masyadong na-depress ako. Sa dinami-dami ng aking gagawin. But today, I just wanna share yung na-order naming cabinet sa Lazada. This is for my kids' room. Yun lang, mga ka-NURSEBES. Thank you for still supporting me.
There's no more partition in between, right?
One of these two pieces of information. But what does science tell us about none?
So, when you look in the sky, you see clusters of stars. Each cluster is a galaxy, but we can only see maybe 100 galaxies. But with the Hubble Space Telescope, they can see 100 billion galaxies. But the number of stars, the better the telescopes that they make, the more stars they find. 20 years ago, they thought altogether there were about 100 million stars. Then it went to 1 billion stars. Then it went to 100 billion stars. Now it's something like 6 septillion stars that they think.
Surely it's impossible that we could be alone in the universe. After all, how could it be amongst this telescope? Hear it again. To close, I want to share one last thing with you. Robert Gray
cool, huh?
with me on this piece of paper that during the writing of this work, he tragically passed away in December last year. I didn't know Robert but professionally, he was a true gentleman with whom my interactions were always warm and spilling over with enthusiasm for the WOW signal. Clear from his life. A data analyst by day, he trained himself to become the world's preeminent expert on the WOW signal. I strongly recommend you pick up this book. This is The Elusive WOW by Robert Gray. It is the definitive book on the topic and a great read. Look, despite the tragedy of Robert's passing, I personally have some solace that this final project he wrote on the WOW signal led to the result that there is still some hope of WOW recurring. Not a lot of hope, but a little. And maybe that someone out there perhaps watching this right now might pick this up and one day resolve the WOW mystery. I am glad that I got to help Robert with that. So, until next time, stay thoughtful, stay curious.
Well, I care about life elsewhere. That's a good question. Life here is a riot of different forms, colors, sizes, noises, environments, behaviors. And I think that people probably have an innate interest in whether something like that happens elsewhere. And the only way to settle that question, of course, is to go along.
We have to generate such that it
Sit down,
matches
Daddy.
the biggest or in other words, out of 180 attempts, how do we get just one success? Now, to make progress though, we have to choose between one of two types of alien signal. In case one, it repeats like clockwork on a regular, constant schedule. So, for example, this could be an alien transmitter that resides on a rotating exoplanet. Or, in case two, it repeats randomly. Perhaps this might be unintentional leakage from an advanced civilization that sporadically points towards the Earth. Perhaps even it could be an automated beacon that deliberately follows a random schedule, since it turns out this would actually minimize the chance of a signal being missed by a receiver on a planet with a fixed rotation rate, like the Earth. Now, some of you might be thinking to yourself, hold on, what about if the WOW signal is not repeating at all? But
Hindi mo nang basta, tapos baboy.
Sa din mo tanda.
Porto, kapatan.
a repeating event, just where the repeat time equals infinity. And so, mathematically, you don't have to change anything here. It is
May pahiga ka na to. Ang iya nga, ang sa dira nga, no, yung palay na lang. May parin, yung na lang ulam.
Hindi magalo-alo.
By Gray himself. The summary of this is that any periodicity below 14 hours is completely excluded, and even beyond that looks very unlikely. So if we assume that billion transmitters have to be periodic, well, there's really not much chance.
Same size study, same length, right?
The way to say wow is to assume that it's not periodic, but rather it follows some random schedule. But even randomness can be characterized statistically. If we assume the average number of pings per unit time is unchanging, then that means that the events must follow the well-known Poisson distribution. What this essentially says is that, yes, the events are being generated by some unknown random generator, but the properties of that random generator are themselves not changing in time. So now the WOW signal is characterized by just two parameters: the duration of the pulses, let's call that t, and the average rate of pulses per unit time, let's call that lambda. Equipped with our big emulator and our random signal generator, we are now finally ready to figure out what are the properties of the WOW signal. To do this, we essentially create a dense 2D grid of possible duration on the x-axis and lambda values up on the y-axis, and ask in each one of these simulations, how often do we get a WOW-like signal? In other words, just one success from 180 observations.
Ngayon, ang Jollibee favorites nyo, fixed ang delivery fee. Kaya mas afford delivery.
You need another screwdriver?
Akin mo, no?
You can see here
Ang
the
naman, no?
color-coded map
Screwdriver. Paano?
where the white region there leads to the highest odds. In that region, the peak probability is in fact 32.3%, almost a third. So that means that the fact that we saw just one WOW signal from the years of linear observations is actually not that weird. It's a 1 in 3 outcome if the WOW signal has a T and lambda in that region. This is why statistics is so important, because let's compare that to our intuition, or in fact the intuition of Jerry Eman, who, remember, was the person who first discovered WOW back in 1977. In a 1994 interview, Jerry said, "We should have seen it again when we looked for it 50 times. But here, we find that it's actually not particularly unusual that Big Ear never saw it again, even after 90 observing days."
So the tricycle driver that delivers yesterday, they're a couple, and I asked them, it's just like they said that it's my nephew's business and we just take over in order to have at least a sense for every delivery. And she said that no matter how big or small the deliveries are, they only get 30 pesos, 50 pesos each.
Focus on those here. In 1994,
Yeah, but if they deliver 50 packages in a day,
for a
they can
total of
deliver,
8 hours.
Yeah.
let's say 4 an hour.
Then, in 2002,
Then,
Gray was out
they can
again
make
when now
1,000
using the
pounds
University of
a day.
Tasmania's 26-meter radio telescope, on target for 84 hours.
But
in total.
realistically, they
And
probably
finally, in
make half that.
2020, half an hour joined the hunt and used the Allen telescope
For each
array
delivery?
to collect more than
No,
100 hours on the field. So that means there's been more than 184 hours of accumulated observations since the original video data. And all of this new data has even higher sensitivity than the original Bigger Observatory did. So look, I get it. It's easy to see why a director in an observatory would just shoot down any proposition to keep going at this point. But
Who has
critically,
lots of
it's not a
clothes?
rigorously justified position. Using
Eunice?
an emulator
So Eunice will be the first to
new
put
observations
on the clothes.
variable probability of
The remaining two will just wait until the one.
observations.
Oh, okay.
Whereas before, at peak
So another one.
probability was 32%,
Who has the
about
second?
a third, the best matching routine in Lambda.
May mga router na galing to. Wala mo na yung may mga router.
About 1 in 50. Now, 1 in 50 is
Mapangbuo, eh, nila?
undeniably improbable, but it's also hardly implausible. It corresponds to 2.4 sigma in statistical parts. But in science, we would only normally consider a hypothesis
You
rejected.
see, not
if it crosses
only
the
will you have to
threshold.
place in
So
these
that means that we would have
cabinets,
to change
but
this
we're gonna put the
1.8%
cabinets
number
down a
to
little bit so you can put
0.3%
stuff on
to finally
top of it.
reject
Yeah.
wow. In our paper, we can use the emulator to actually predict how much more data is necessary to get to that point. And the answer? Around 1,500 hours of additional observing time would be necessary, or 62 days of accumulated observations. That might seem daunting, but it could be achieved.
You will not be
in a single
confused
year
because
with
they
precision.
put like a
And the
label like
payoff
side
would be
panel,
a conclusive
top and
answer.
bottom,
Yeah, very
and
well labeled.
backing.
Either we see wow repeat and know it's the real deal, a frankly earth-shattering result, or we see nothing and can finally exclude it as an astrophysical source to high statistical probability. Now, one thing I haven't revealed yet are what are the most likely properties of the wow signal. I told you those most likely properties are occurring, but what are the associated durations
It's nice.
and mean repeat rate lambda that correspond to that most likely solution? Coupling our emulator to an inference framework, we can constrain that the duration of the signal is between 2 minutes and 37
Two.
hours to
So
99%
the second,
confidence. And as
the
for
second
mean
highest-
repeat rate, that comes in between about once every other month
the
to
second
12
largest
times
or
every
more
100%
clothes
confidence.
will be the one to
Hindi pa
put.
ito pa.
If you have less, then you can wait for the other one.
Ako na din isa. Ako lang din. Ito ko.
Just go out.
No, sir. No, sir. Bibili there because I focus bro.
Here we try to push the statistics as far as we can, but there's only so much. I wasn't satisfied. I wanted to go back and do the wow signal justice, to fix these issues and complete a final analysis. I wanted to know, I needed to know, could the wow signal still be a viable alien transmission even after all of those new results? Whilst making that video, I started corresponding with Robert Gray, who literally wrote the book about the wow signal. Perhaps more than anyone else, Gray has pursued wow with a feverish curiosity, visiting the original site, interviewing the team, and studying the technical diagrams of the observatory. He even set up a 12-foot radio telescope in his backyard to continuously monitor wow from home. Remarkably, even though he was not trained as an astronomer, he was awarded telescope time on the very large array in New Mexico to look for the wow, the first amateur astronomer to ever use the facility. So after the video was posted, we continued to correspond about the wow signal and started working on a new, improved analysis. So what is new here? What is the big idea? The basic premise of our approach is to create a responsive emulator of the Big Ear Observatory and indeed the other observatories that observe the wow field. Back in 1985, Gray had visited Ohio State University, who operated the Big Ear, and managed to reconstruct the exact dates of each and every time Big Ear looked at a wow field. Even though wow was only seen once, Big Ear actually observed that field on 122 unique days, spanning August 1977 to March 1984. However, only 90 of these were actually
Kakasalang na ano, ah.
due to various issues at the site. We also
Go
know
team,
that
go!
Big Ear has this peculiar observing mode where two horns pass over the same patch of the sky each day, separated by 3 minutes, and each one observing for just 72 seconds. So, equipped with this information, can we now simulate a hypothetical alien transmission from the wow field and ask, in how many of those 180 observations did we expect to detect it? Now, this is where the fun begins, because with our emulator, we could change the properties of our hypothetical alien transmissions and see how would it affect the observations that the alien would get. So, for example,
Dalag ko ng kapit mo dang apo no no.
we stayed on for about 10 minutes, then we would expect
Ano?
30
Dalag ko ng kapit mong apo.
However, if the signal repeats, say, once every millennia instead, then we would get 0 detections. In this way, we have a big ear sandbox, if you will, where we can
Maybe we can move this one.
data as hard as we can. Many of you will know that we've discussed the WOW signal before on this channel in our Black Swans video. There, I discussed a different cause research paper where I developed an analytic model for dealing with one-off events. The model works very well in a single observatory with constant settings, but